Hey, we're live. All right. Hey,
Bonjour.
welcome. Thank you, Montreal. Thank you, MCAF, for having us. Merci, Festival BD de Montréal. I'm Chris Sanagan, the writer of Group of Seven Comics, and I'm coming from Guelph, Ontario.
And I'm also Chris Sanagan. Oh, no, I'm hearing. Okay. Okay, I'm Jason Lapidus, the illustrator of Group of Seven, and I'm coming from beautiful Richmond Hill, Ontario.
Excellent. So we're here to talk about our comic book series, Group of Seven. You're probably wondering who we are and why you should care. And so we're going to try and do that in about 20 minutes. We also understand this is a Q&A. So anytime you have any questions, Jason and I are happy to answer, happy to chat. Group of Seven is a self-published indie comic book. So we're happy to chat about the processing, the process piece, self-publishing, collaboration, and then anything else that happens to come up. So please send those questions our way. So, and one more thing, because it is MCAF, we're also going to highlight some specific Montreal related pieces to Group of Seven for the audience. Hopefully that's going to be a bit of fun as well. Group
Sounds
of Seven.
good, Chris.
Thanks, man. Group of Seven, what's it about? Why are we here? So Group of Seven, A Most Secret Tale, is our comic book, and it is an action-adventure comic book series that's set during the First World War that features a number of very famous historical Canadians who were soldiers at the time who team up on a secret mission to save the world. The world. As I mentioned, actually, Gabriel, if we can get that trade paperback front cover up.
The first image.
The first image. Right now, you're looking at the banner of all 6 issues. Those 6 issues have been collected in a trade paperback called A Most Secret Tale, which is currently available now. The characters of the book you're probably wondering about, the setting of the book you're probably wondering about. Well, it takes place at the Battle of Vimy Ridge, which is one of the most famous battles in Canadian history, military history, and certainly in the First World War. And as I mentioned, there are 7 characters who are taken from Canadian history who you might recognize absolutely in terms of their names. So the first is John McCrae, who you may know as the poet, the author of the poem In Flanders Fields, or en français, Au Champ d'Honneur, which you may say at every Remembrance Day ceremony every year in Canada. So he's the protagonist of the book, and he's accompanied by A.Y. Jackson, one of the Group of Seven painters, hence the reference to the title Group of Seven. And also A.Y. Jackson is from Montreal, so there you go, first Montreal reference in there for you as well. Francis Pickamagabow, who's the most highly decorated Indigenous soldier of the First World War, one of the most decorated in Canadian history. Lester B. Pearson, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in the 1950s and was also Prime Minister of Canada in the 1960s. Frederick Banting, who also won the Nobel Prize and co-discoverer of insulin, pretty important discovery, medical discovery. Norman Bethune, who was a doctor, humanitarian, and medical innovator. And I believe the last, but not least, I was going to say not least, Conn Smythe, owner operator of the Toronto Maple Leafs, for those hockey fans out there. And the book basically kind of includes these characters, puts them together, involves a number of other historical figures. Malunka Savic, who happens to be the most highly decorated female combatant in the First World War in the Serbian army. General Arthur Curie, who was, arguably Canada's most famous general, and also ended up being principal of McGill University. That's 2 Montreal references later on in life. And Georgina Fane Pope, who was the matron of the Canadian Army Medical Corps and led the nursing sisters as well. So again, these characters are all thrown into an action-adventure series that's chock full of references to Canadiana, Canadian history, art, pop culture, music, lyrical references, and it's a real mismatch of Canadiana thrown in. And basically, it's a real love letter from Jason and I, from the things that we love so much about the movies and comic books of our youth in the late 70s and 80s. but obviously with some Canadian flair set up as well.
For sure. Now, just to clarify, or to make it totally clear, the comic is not a biography or a historic document of any kind, or documenting any kind of history. It's a complete fictionalization using those historic figures as relatively two-dimensional characters, taking them and using them in story archetypes, adventure archetype characters, and assembling that team of adventurers to go on this secret mission that never happened. There's nothing factual about the actual mission they went on. It's a complete fiction that we created.
Completely fictional, but inspired by real people, real events, and also the very real relationships that the characters had post-war. So there are a number of the book kind of weaves in and out of 20th century Canadian history, and actually is using research and primary sources and those kinds of pieces. The fact that many of these characters had very real demonstrated relationships later on allows us to use that as narrative advice to then set up how they have first met in the first Lord. Now we actually have a question, Jason.
We have two.
We have two. Oh my gosh!
Well,
I've got a question.
First one.
Which one do you want to do?
I'll start with the first one. When did we start the comics? The first issue, we released the first part of the first issue online in 2017, and we got the comic out, I think, Canada Day. It was finished in 2017, and then since then we've put out a couple in the first year, and a few in the second year, and a few in the third year. And it's been a really fun process to go from making no comics in our lives to making comics in our lives as regularly as we possibly can. I love the process of making comics. I think there are very few tasks and practices that I've had in my life that are as rewarding and as both short-term and long-term satisfying as much as making pages of comics and then finally getting that thing in our hands. I absolutely love it. So it's been a few years, which is really quite a beginner position to put us in, considering if, a lot of cartoonists and comic creators start when they are in their very early 20s. And I'm about 22, 23 now. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
you're younger than me. You're younger than me. So that's key.
It's starting this process, in my 40s has been like such a fun thing to do. So it's only been a few years. And now we're at the first trade, which takes us to the second question from Jean-Francois.
I see that. Absolutely. What's the process of going from single issues to trade paperback?
Do you want me to take this one too?
I think you should. I think that's a good one.
So the process is it should be very simple if you did everything right the first time. So if when you make your pages, the digital files, if you make them correctly with long-term thinking and an understanding of bookmaking, when you make your first comic, it's really easy. All you do is gather the files you already have, send them to the printer, and off you go. Maybe you would add an image for the spine as well, and add in maybe a title page, things like that. With us, it was a little more complicated because the first two issues were the first two comics that we ever made, and all the rookie mistakes that one makes when they're beginning making comics or making anything, they're very present in the work that we have. So, such as just simply page dimensions, going back and trying to say, okay, what did I do by the sixth issue? How do I now make the issues 1 through 6 uniform? Going back and changing word balloon styles and font style and all the little things to get some consistency across the document to improve that as well. And lastly, but probably most difficultly for me, the piece around completion and being happy with the completed page. And the first 50 pages of making comics were excruciatingly painful, emotionally hard to get them out, and I don't think that they ever achieved a level of finish that I was looking for as a new cartoonist. And getting a chance to just revisit them and maybe add some flat grays, some tones to help separate characters and create more depth and clarify the narrative. It's allowed me an opportunity to just tweak a few images here or there. And I went so far as redrawing 3 pages from scratch because they absolutely needed it. There were some pages that were unusable. I had to remove hand-drawn word balloons from the images to use them. And some of my word balloons were so massive, there wasn't an image left underneath to work with moving forward. So there were 3 pages I redrew, and that was a treat. I loved getting to readdress them, and I think I made some vast improvements for our readers, which is very cool. So that's kind of how it goes. We send it then to the printer. We send the files to the printer, and they're going to tell us when to pick it up, and we're going to have to load up some vehicles with some boxes and then send them out.
It's a constant process. I think that's what it comes down to, is that when we think of whether it's manuscript creation or character design or whatever it happens to be, when you think of where it starts to where we think a finished product is finished, to then actually having another look and seeing where we can make improvements,
right.
Both, improvements in everything, in story, improvements in design, improvements in formatting, all of it, to be able to put forward something that's more consistent in look and feel, right. Which is the big one. I mean, Jason kind of talked about it a little bit, but certainly, that was, if you don't mind me speaking for you for a quick moment, but this is, for me, this is the first piece of fiction I've ever written, and for Jason, certainly he had never published any of his art. So, we're 2 old friends who embarked on this project together, and have been collaborating pretty consistently every day for about 6 years. And so, maybe to the chagrin of our families to some respect, but
come on,
it's true. They love each other. We know each other. They
do. So. We've got another couple questions here. Do you want to
come again? Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, basically, in terms
please.
of that, just again, process. Just being open to progress and process and learning in that capacity, moving it forward. Right. What other questions do we have?
Johan asks, "Do both of you do the art and the text?" And no, we do not. Chris writes the script, and I get to do the art. Yep. And luckily, Chris, you have set an amazing example to me as to how to collaborate. You very successfully role model, or I should say just model, how to be open to take feedback and not taking every bit of feedback as a personal criticism. So you've left yourself open to me saying, hey, do you think we should add this, or do you think that? And you've been very open about listening to feedback from me, and I hope that I can be that good a collaborator back toward you. And besides it just being about art and text, the process of making a comic book or graphic novel is, especially the collaboration piece, is also very much around all the peripheral tasks. There's a ton of social media to do for us, luckily, and there's a website and finances and correspondence with retailers and with readers, and you've been really proactive about taking on some of those pieces that are time consuming that really do help our collaboration become more successful. So just those 2 pieces, right? There's some publishers and the team of publishing is a healthy one. So it's really cool.
Absolutely. I see there's some more questions as well.
Okay.
Julien. Is this our friend Julien?
Well, I was also thinking Jean-Francois might be.
I think Jean-Francois might be.
We met these boys in Guelph, and they were lovely.
Yes. Miss you guys.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to go to Montreal, was to see these guys again. Wow. They were a lot of fun to hang out with.
I can't think of anything better I want to do right now than hang out in a park in Montreal and talk comics.
Yeah, I was very much.
Sorry to break any hearts out there, but
well, it's mine. It's the most broken. Truthfully, yes, I was very, very, very excited to come to Montreal.
But to the question, do we plan a French version? We would absolutely love a French version of this book. We see for a number of reasons. One, we think. Why don't we just want to have a French version of our work out there? There's an audience that is French reading and French speaking that I think this book could get out to. Yeah. Obviously, the other piece too is it's speaking as it entering the book and what it's about. It is very much a love letter to Canadiana, and that Canadiana includes France, and France includes French.
Includes French, yeah.
It takes place in France. Sorry. Anyway, point being, it is absolutely something that we would love to investigate, and I guess we actually talked about this right before this call about, hey, I don't know what moving on in the future, if there are any translators out there, are there any? I'm not sure any people who you think who could help us in some manner or are interested in some manner of that piece. We would love to hear from you. So
I would add to that, Chris, truthfully,
yeah,
I don't think I will feel that our project is complete until there's a version in French as well.
yeah.
And any other language that Canadians speak.
Well, that's
right?
parts we've talked a lot about. One of our characters is
It's like
Anishinaabe.
such a Canadian book.
Is Anishinaabe, right?
Yeah.
Indigenous. And man, would we love to see this book written in Indigenous language, Indigenous script at some point. That would be such a huge. That would make our hearts fill with such joy if we were able to make that happen.
Make it as accessible to anyone who loves Canadian.
We've done a lot of we've done some work with schools, for example, how this kind of connects to the curriculum here in Ontario in various pieces, whether it's high school or elementary school. And so again, as a vehicle for having those conversations about Canadian history or talking about those pieces in some manner, to have it in translated and accessible and as much as it can be would be absolutely something we'd love to pursue.
Very cool.
All right, what else we got?
Where can we buy the trade? That's, I guess, the most obvious one. If you go to www.groupof7 with the number 7 groupof7comics.ca, that would be the easiest place to buy our book, and then from there we would ship it to you. Just
absolutely
the old-fashioned way. It will be in stores, I know, around the Greater Toronto area, but and in Guelph, it includes Guelph.
Yeah,
and I imagine we're going to probably push to get it to stores outside of our local region, but we haven't had specifics in mind other than a few shops here or there.
I'd love to see it across Canada and elsewhere.
Of course, yeah. But right now, buying it from us is the fastest way to answer that question. Yeah.
By the way, it is the Julian. By the way, I don't know if you saw that. So.
Yes, the Julian.
And go buy his book too. It's great. Did we say we have did we have cutoff, or did I hear Gabriel?
I'm not sure if that was 4.
Oh,
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. There was another one in there, Jason, about doing our own publishing, and it looks like perhaps kind of arts, maybe funding. I'm guessing maybe from Philippe. Arts funding maybe at the moment in Canada. To be fair, we actually did investigate the granting route here in Ontario specifically, and neither of us qualify.
Yeah,
at the moment, yeah, it's a lot more. We thought, actually, given the subject matter as well, and maybe the its connectivity to different pieces. We thought it might be an avenue we could be successful in, but actually having done the work, neither of us, this is something that we do on the side of our lives, and so I think because of that, we don't tend to fall into a category it was like a category we didn't fit into it as a practicing artist in the way it happened to be constructed as per the grant programs. But however, saying that, it doesn't mean that once we do like a few more years of this, suddenly we start qualifying. So it's one of those things where, we've been at it for 6 years, 3 years published. And so once we have a little more on their plate, we actually do start qualifying for those grants. If that was the question, I hope that was the answer to the question you're asking for, Philip.
I think so. Jerome asks, is there anything else that we're working on? So the series is continuing. Once our trade is out, and we have, like we said before, the 6 issues of the comic series have been out, we're going to continue making single issues. So issue 7 starts a new story arc that we call Peregrines, and it's about 4 nurses in the front lines who have a bit of a double life where they also exist in a secret organization within the Canadian Armed Forces where they complete secret missions and do really cool stuff. And it's, so like I said, 4 nurses, and they're spies, and they get to do some parachuting and amazing cool stuff. So Peregrine starts shortly. The layouts and pencils are done. And as soon as we get the finishing touches on the trade paperback for these first 6, I'll start on the inking of issue 7, which should be a real treat.
And before I forget, I think, because we probably only got a couple minutes left. I don't know if you, Gabriel, if you could put about those images of those new images of 3, 4, and 5. Was that what Jason You're asking for it because I wanted to show them how this book and then how it's related to Montreal.
Right. Okay. So that's the first image, and then
That's the cover of the book.
Row of comics. There we go. That's beautiful.
1952, Conn Smythe gets off the bus in Montreal and shows up at the old Montreal Forum. You can go to the next page, or the next image. Okay, and he's reading the newspaper, and the Leafs are playing the Habs that night, and he's lost in thought, and he mistakenly wanders into, next image, the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, and seated we have Maurice Richard, Elmer Lack, and Bernard Boom Boom Geoffrion. And the reason why we love this so much, aside from being big hockey fans and loving the history and mythology of both the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, is if you notice, and any hockey hat fans out there will know that the quote in the dressing room, the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, is the quote from In Flanders Fields, which John McCrae wrote. So, of course, we use this again as a narrative device. The very next page, we go back to the war, and it's Smythe and McCrae meeting for the first time. And perhaps, and so again, we use that to help show the progress of their relationship. So again, using that inspiration from actual history, from actual events, to then create this fictional tale that is inspired by these people, these events, and these scenes from that collectively a lot of us are aware of and share through our Canadian history.
If we have time, there are two more quick questions. Julian asks, is Lapidus a Greek god? No, I'm not Greek. Moving on.
Hey, Jean-Francois. You guys are great. I don't think... are the Habs in the top 24?
Ooh, are you throwing shade? Come on, we shouldn't be doing that.
You're right, we shouldn't.
I would love to see. There's nothing that we'd love to see more than a Montreal-Toronto playoff round. It'd be wonderful. When the Habs and Leafs are both healthy teams, hockey feels wonderful and Canada feels great. So let's hopefully see that in the future. Wonderful.
So you can find us, you can find us at website www.group7comics.ca. It's got the number there. There is the place where you can order the trade. You can also download individual issues right now. They are free. If you are interested in learning a little more, seeing what we're up to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are free for download digitally right now from the website. We've got our socials there as well, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then our names too. If you ever want to reach out to us, it's the same for us on Instagram. Chris Sanagan, at Jason Lapidus. That's where we are.
Merci beaucoup, Montreal.
Thank you very much.